The series begins with Rue, who is born in the United States just 3 days after the Twin Towers collapse. She grows up in a middle-class family, and early on we see her sitting with her mother, who starts noticing that her daughter sees strange things. After medical evaluations, a specialist diagnoses Rue with obsessive-compulsive disorder and generalized anxiety, warning that she may also be bipolar. Rue is placed on heavy medication at a very young age, and her mother reassures her that many people live with the same conditions, while hiding the darker truth that most of them eventually took their own lives. As Rue gets older and starts school, she begins suffering from intense panic attacks that leave her gasping for air. Suddenly, she collapses, blacks out, and feels as if she has died. Years later, Rue reaches high school, and we see her at a party, where it becomes clear that she has developed a serious drug addiction. When her mother discovers the truth, she sends her to a rehabilitation center, where Rue spends the entire summer. After completing treatment, she is released, and the moment she sees her younger sister, she hugs her tightly before getting into the car with her mother to head home. At the same time, Jules appears and introduces herself to Rue, explaining that she has just moved to town and will be attending the same school. Despite everything, it is obvious that Rue has no real intention of staying clean. Then, as soon as she gets home, she goes straight to her old dealer, Fezco. He asks if she truly got sober like everyone says, so Rue jokes with him, claiming her life changed after devoting herself to Christ. Not long after, she buys drugs that act fast and completely numb her senses. As she leaves, she runs into Nate, the school's football star. Rue clearly dislikes him, especially because he once tried to sexually harass her. Nate is surprised to see her and invites her to a party at McKay's house. McKay seems uneasy, worried about how his mother would react if she found out, but Nate pressures him until he agrees. Meanwhile, the group spots Jules riding her bike, and Nate decides to mess with her, deliberately hitting her with his car until she crashes. We then learn that Jules moved to this town after her parents separated, and that she now lives with her father. Later, she opens a dating app, becomes interested in one of the messages she receives, and decides to meet the guy. She apologizes to her friend Kat, telling her she won't be able to attend the party with her. When Rue gets home, she finds her mother waiting and questioning where she has been. Rue lies, saying she went out to eat, but her mother doesn't believe her and admits she no longer trusts her. Frustrated, Rue locks herself in her room, only to panic even more when she learns her mother plans to drug test her. Desperate, Rue looks for a way out and realizes the safest option is to use someone else's urine sample. She goes to Lexi's house, her longtime friend, even though they've grown distant. Still, Lexi agrees to help and gives Rue her sample. After Lexi's father greets her, Rue rushes home, knowing the test checks temperature. Inside the bathroom, Rue's mother insists on staying with her, unable to fully trust her. When she finally turns away, she explains that she is only doing this because she's afraid of losing her daughter. Suddenly, Rue remembers her younger sister finding her unconscious after an overdose, and the guilt hits hard. When the test comes back clean, her mother feels relieved, believing Rue hasn't relapsed. Once again, Rue lies, telling her mother she'll be staying over at Lexi's to attend the party, and her mother agrees. Meanwhile, Jules gets ready to meet the man she's been talking to online. She becomes anxious upon arriving at the location and texts him to make sure he won't hurt her. Elsewhere, McKay grows irritated with Nate for speaking cruelly about the girl he likes, who turns out to be Cassie, Lexi's sister. Nate shows McKay explicit photos of Cassie, deeply affecting him. Later, McKay meets Cassie, but he seems distracted. He tells her she's the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, which touches her deeply. They become intimate, but tension quickly rises, and Cassie lashes out at him. McKay apologizes, insisting he never meant to hurt her. Later, Rue heads to the party and runs into a group of girls who are shocked to see her and offer her a ride. She immediately agrees, since she hates riding a bike while high because she crashes too often. At the same time, it becomes clear that the man Jules is meeting is much older than her, forcing her to lie and claim she's 22. Nervous but determined, she goes through with it. When Rue arrives at the party, she snorts the drugs she bought, and suddenly, everything feels distorted, as if she's walking on walls instead of the ground. Jules then decides to head to the party and messages Kat, but Kat never sees it because she's busy drinking with McKay's brothers. As the night unfolds, Fezco sits beside Rue and admits he was genuinely worried about her. He tells her he's seen too many people die from drugs, and even if he doesn't understand what's going on in her head, he knows for sure that drugs are not the answer. Rue opens up to Fezco and starts talking about her childhood. She tells him that one night, after her father's test results came back, she was sleeping next to her parents when she suddenly had a severe panic attack and passed out. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors injected her with Valium. Rue explains that in that moment, she realized this was the feeling she had been searching for her entire life, because the world suddenly felt quieter, safer, and less overwhelming. Fezco is visibly moved by her honesty and admits that he's genuinely high just being part of a conversation this deep. Meanwhile, Nate is growing increasingly frustrated after his ex-girlfriend Maddie deliberately tries to provoke him, making him jealous by being with another guy. Unable to control his anger, Nate turns his attention toward Jules. He confronts her at the party, asking who invited her. Jules freezes and struggles to answer, and Nate keeps pressing her, loudly asking if anyone there even knows her. Eventually, Jules snaps. She grabs a knife, threatens Nate, and deliberately cuts her own hand right in front of him. Terrified, Nate backs away immediately. Rue witnesses the entire scene, follows Jules outside, and introduces herself. When Rue asks her what she plans to do, Jules says she's heading home. Rue offers to go with her, and Jules agrees without hesitation. Back at Rue's house, Rue cleans Jules's wound and then casually suggests that they drink together. Later that night, when Nate returns home, a disturbing truth is revealed. His father is the man who had been talking to Jules online. We learn that Nate discovered his father's secret when he was just 11 years old, after finding and watching all of his videos. Terrified, Nate ran back to his room, but his father followed him, woke him up, and told him that from the moment Nate was born, he knew he had an unbreakable will. He tells him that no one in this world will ever truly support or protect him, and that he should never allow himself to be weak or give up. Deeply affected by his father's words, Nate throws himself into extreme physical training. As he grows older, he joins the American football team, excels by the end of the season, and eventually becomes the team captain. We learn that Nate thrives on winning and dominance, but harbors deep resentment toward the other men in his life. He has an older brother he despises for being weak, and he shows little respect for his mother either, seeing her as passive and neglected. Nate begins mentally listing what he likes and dislikes in women, and that's when he notices Maddie, who perfectly matches everything he desires. They start dating, and Nate becomes obsessively protective of her, convinced it's his duty to shield her from predators and harassment at school and in public. When he learns that Maddie is a virgin with no past relationships, he becomes even more attached, to the point of imagining marriage and starting a family with her. That illusion begins to crack on the night of the party, when Nate's uncontrollable anger finally surfaces. After returning to school following rehab, Rue feels anxious and out of place, but she relaxes the moment she sees Jules. It becomes clear that the two have grown close since the party. Rue offers Jules a drink, and although Jules hesitates at first, she decides to try it. Watching Jules drink fills Rue with happiness. At the same time, Kat meets Ethan and immediately seems intrigued by him. Soon after, Rue attends class and desperately tries to avoid her teacher, who asks students to talk about what they did over the summer. Rue fails to escape and is forced onto the stage. As the spotlight hits her, she freezes, unable to speak, while the teacher pressures her to describe the most impactful moment of her break. Suddenly, Rue remembers being hospitalized, her younger sister's disappointment, and the constant fights with her mother. She completely breaks down when she recalls waking up in the hospital to find her mother and sister asleep beside her bed. Hearing classmates whisper and mock her, Rue panics, abandons the stage, and runs to the bathroom. She tries to use drugs to calm herself, but stops when she hears someone knocking. When she opens the door, she finds Lexi, who only wants to check on her. Instead of accepting the concern, Rue lashes out, accusing Lexi of making her flush the drugs and cruelly telling her that she was never her closest friend. Hurt and humiliated, Lexi walks away. Meanwhile, Nate begins closely monitoring the guy who hooked up with Maddie at the party, determined to learn everything about him so he can eventually take revenge. After school, Rue attends her required rehab meetings, where she remembers the first time she ever used drugs. We learn that her father used medication to cope with his illness, and because her mother was working extra jobs to pay for treatment, Rue often stayed alone with him. At just 13 years old, she decided to try the drugs herself. Once the meeting ends, Rue manipulates the attendance coordinator, forcing him to sign off on all the meetings she skipped so she can convince her mother that she's improving. The next day at school, Kat notices everyone staring at her and soon discovers that McKay's brother secretly filmed her and leaked the video. Kat confronts him and threatens to report him to the police unless he deletes it. Terrified, he agrees and spreads the word that Kat was not the girl in the video. Later, Kat is called into the principal's office and questioned about the leaked footage. Kat firmly denies it and accuses the principal of profiling her because she's overweight, pointing out that the girl in the video was also overweight. Intimidated, the principal panics and apologizes. After that, Rue and Jules leave school together, racing each other on their bikes and genuinely enjoying the moment. Rue invites Jules to have dinner at her house, but Jules apologizes and says she can't make it because her father wants to have dinner with her. She promises to come over another day. Meanwhile, Kat decides to blackmail McKay's brother after what he did to her, forcing him to buy her expensive gifts and pay for everything out of his own pocket. McKay goes to Cassie's house to see her and feels awkward sitting with her mother, who tells him that Cassie reminds her of herself. Cassie quickly steps in and asks her mother to leave them alone. Elsewhere, we see Jules chatting online with someone whose face she has never seen, yet she seems happy and emotionally invested in the conversation. At the same time, Rue goes to Fezco's place and asks him for drugs. He refuses and tells her to leave immediately because some friends of his are about to stop by. He warns her that they're dangerous and that he doesn't want her around them. Rue stubbornly refuses to leave without getting drugs. As they argue, his friends arrive, who turn out to be serious drug dealers. Fezco tells Rue to stay quiet and not say a word until they leave. Rue is terrified but manages to hold herself together. Meanwhile, McKay opens up to Cassie about how stressed and overwhelmed he feels at college. Cassie tries to get closer to him emotionally, but McKay pulls away, accusing her of only caring about relationships. Embarrassed and hurt, Cassie distances herself. When the dealer at Fezco's house notices Rue, he assumes she's Fezco's sister, but it's clear he doesn't fully believe it. He forces Rue to take extremely strong drugs. Fezco tries to stop him, but fails. Panicking, Rue silently prays that nothing happens to her, as she's forced to take the drugs against her will. Meanwhile, Nate follows the guy who hooked up with Maddie until he learns where he lives. Nate sneaks into his house and shocks him by accusing him of raping his girlfriend. Nate threatens him, saying he can't report anything because Maddie is underage, meaning it would legally count as statutory rape. The guy defends himself, insisting that Maddie wanted it and that nothing was forced, but Nate refuses to listen. He brutally beats him until his face is completely destroyed, then calmly takes a shower, gets dressed, and leaves. Back at Fezco's place, Rue loses consciousness from the drugs. The dealer demands money, but Rue has none, so Fezco pays him to make him leave. Afterward, Fezco calls Jules and asks her to help by taking Rue home. Later, Nate meets up with Maddie, and the two end up getting back together. McKay messages Cassie to apologize, explaining that he's just under a lot of pressure from college. Jules meets Fezco, takes Rue with her, and lets her stay the night. Once home, Jules continues talking online with the same guy, who is revealed to be Nate. The story then flashes back to Kat's childhood. We learn that she once had a happy life and was known for being smart. As a child, Kat falls in love with a classmate who also likes her back. But after a family trip, Kat gains weight from drinking too much juice. The boy slowly pulls away because of her weight, which shatters her confidence. Kat tries to lose weight but repeatedly fails. As she grows older, she begins writing romantic stories online, which become extremely popular. She gains a huge following but remains anonymous, and no one knows she's the author. We also learn that Kat deeply hates school and everyone in her town. Back in the present, Rue attends a rehab meeting and tells everyone she has been sober for 60 days. In reality, she's only been clean for 2 weeks, after Jules forced her to stop by threatening to end their friendship. Unable to handle losing someone she loves again, Rue promises Jules she'll quit. When Rue gets home, her mother is waiting and angrily confronts her for staying out late and not answering her calls. Rue lies, claiming her phone died, then asks her mother to drug test her to prove she hasn't been using. Her mother agrees and feels relieved when the test comes back clean, unaware that the sample actually belongs to Jules. At the meeting, Rue shares her story, saying that 2 months earlier, she woke up from a coma, and the moment she saw her mother and sister, she realized how wrong she had been. She admits she terrified them and decided to change for their sake, believing she owes it to everyone she loves to be okay. After 2 weeks of sobriety, Rue returns to school, but she's anxious because Jules is falling in love and growing distant, constantly distracted by someone else. We see Jules talking to Nate nonstop, their relationship intensifying until she unknowingly falls for him without realizing who he really is. Maddie begins to sense that something is wrong, noticing that Nate seems distant and uninterested in her. While they talk, Nate keeps receiving messages, but he grows nervous and refuses to open his phone. Jules talks to Rue and tries to convince her about her new love interest, admitting that she feels like she's falling in love. Rue isn't convinced, but she chooses to stay quiet. Around the same time, Kat buys a lemonade as part of her diet, but she doesn't have enough money, so Ethan offers to pay for it. Embarrassed, Kat explains to the woman selling the lemonade that she's on a diet and asks Ethan not to offer her food anymore. Shortly after, Kat decides to start making money online by posting videos while keeping her face hidden. Jules is genuinely happy when she learns that Rue has been sober for 2 weeks. She hugs her tightly and tells her how proud she is. Afterward, Rue leaves to grab some water and notices medication sitting on the table. She recognizes it as drugs, freezes for a moment, then quietly steals a pill. Rue excuses herself, rushes out of the house, takes the pill, and later heads to a recovery meeting where she once again talks about herself. As she leaves, a man from the meeting named Ali waits for her outside and tells her that 60 days is a long time and that her share was powerful. Rue thanks him, and Ali asks what saved her. When he learns that it was her younger sister, he reflects on how much damage people can cause in their lives and admits he can't imagine the impact something like that would have on a 13-year-old. His words deeply affect Rue when he explains that her sister will likely struggle to trust people and constantly fear losing the ones she loves, which could affect all her future relationships. It becomes clear that Ali knows Rue is lying about her sobriety. He tells her he's experienced enough to spot it easily, then hands her his card and suggests they meet for coffee sometime. When Rue gets home and sees her sister, guilt overwhelms her. She sits beside her and hugs her tightly. Meanwhile, Maddie goes through Nate's phone and grows even more suspicious when she finds a photo, even though she can't tell who he's cheating with. Later, Kat uses the money she's earned to buy new clothes and completely changes her style. When she arrives at school, everyone stares at her, but she doesn't care and seems genuinely happy. Jules runs up to Rue, excitedly telling her that the guy she's been talking to asked to meet her. She smiles as she explains they plan to meet at the lake during the festival. Rue immediately gets upset and warns her that it's dangerous, insisting she should meet him somewhere public. Jules is confused and hurt by Rue's intense reaction. She tells Rue that she only shared this with her because she thought Rue would be happy for her. Upset, Jules walks away. Feeling guilty, Rue goes to Jules' house and apologizes, explaining that she only reacted that way because she was scared something might happen to her and that she couldn't bear losing her. Overcome with emotion, Rue breaks down in tears. Jules hugs her, reassures her that she's not angry, and tells her she loves her. After leaving Jules' place, Rue goes to Fezco and asks him for drugs, but he refuses, telling her he won't help her destroy herself. He warns her not to come back and shuts the door in her face. Furious and desperate, Rue pounds on the door, screaming that he's the reason she's like this and that he can't abandon her now. She tells him that if he truly cared, he never would have let her use drugs in the first place. Rue keeps shouting and begging him to open the door, but Fezco remains firm and refuses. Eventually, Rue breaks down in tears. With no one else to turn to, she calls Ali and asks him to meet her for coffee. The story then flashes back to Jules' childhood. We see her mother taking her to a psychiatrist because of her struggles with self-harm. Jules clearly doesn't want to go, but she slowly opens up during the session. Her relief turns to shock when she realizes her mother lied to her and is actually admitting her into a psychiatric hospital. Jules screams and begs to be let go, but her mother refuses. She fights everyone around her, even injuring a nurse, and ends up spending days locked inside the hospital. One day, when a nurse brings her food, Jules begs him to leave a soda can behind. After he leaves, she uses it to cut herself. Over time, Jules improves and is eventually released, but her mother's condition worsens. Her parents separate, and Jules goes to live with her father, whom she loves deeply. As she grows older, Jules enters many relationships, yet constantly feels unreal, like a character in a book or a TV show. Meeting Rue changes everything. Jules feels an instant connection and believes Rue will be her closest friend forever, long before she ever falls in love. Back in the present, Rue meets Ali and talks nonstop until he cuts her off, telling her he's not interested in everything she's saying. He asks why she really called him. Rue admits she had no one else and opens up about Jules, confessing that she's terrified of losing her. Ali tells her that her story sounds a lot like drugs. Rue responds that it feels like a good thing, but Ali calmly explains that drugs only feel good the first time. The day of the festival finally arrives, and everyone attends. We see Fezco opening his convenience store, preparing to sell drugs freely as the night unfolds. Rue attends the festival with her younger sister and Lexi, while Jules is there with Kat, the two of them laughing, playing games, and having fun. At the same time, Nate gets into a heated argument with Maddie over her outfit. He tells her he can't introduce her to his parents dressed like that and demands that she go home and change. In the middle of all this, Jules spots Rue, runs toward her, hugs her tightly, and tells her how much she missed her. Lexi feels awkward as Rue leaves her standing alone to be with Jules. Elsewhere, McKay takes Cassie to Nate's father's restaurant. Nate's father asks if they're a couple, and McKay quickly denies it, saying they're just hanging out. Cassie is hurt by his response and storms off. McKay chases after her, trying to explain that he didn't want to say anything in front of Nate because he knew Nate would make stupid comments, especially since he knows about her past. Cassie is deeply affected and doesn't know how to respond. McKay eventually walks away. Later, Cassie runs into Maddie, who notices how upset she is and takes her with her. The two end up buying drugs from Fezco. Maddie then confesses that she went through Nate's phone phone and found disturbing things on it. Meanwhile, Jules unexpectedly comes face to face with Nate's father. She is shocked, and when Rue tells her that he's Nate's dad, Jules can't believe it. To prove it, she walks up to him and asks for a drink. He completely freezes, drops the cup, and panics the moment he recognizes her. Rue watches in disbelief, realizing something is seriously wrong. At the same time, Nate notices them together and clearly grows uneasy. Rue becomes afraid, knowing that Nate's father is wealthy and powerful, and realizes that Jules has now drawn his attention. As they're talking, Rue gets a call from her mother, who says her sister isn't answering her phone and asks Rue to find her and get home immediately. We then see Kat standing with Ethan, and the two seem to have great chemistry. Ethan offers to buy tickets for a ride while Kat grabs them another drink. Kat happily agrees, but moments later she's crushed when she sees Ethan talking to another girl. Misunderstanding the situation, not realizing the girl is actually his sister's friend, Kat gets angry, drops the drink, and walks away. At the same time, a drunk Maddie decides to publicly embarrass Nate's family while they're being honored, shouting insults at his mother. Furious, Nate drags Maddie away, chokes her in a fit of rage, then lets go and tells her they're breaking up. Maddie stops him and confronts him about the photos she saw on his phone. Meanwhile, Jules and Rue search desperately for Rue's sister, but can't find her, eventually splitting up to look separately. Kat, still upset after leaving Ethan, decides to start a relationship with an older man. Nate tries to explain himself to Maddie and begs her to promise she won't expose his secret. He starts telling her the truth about his father, then apologizes and tells her he loves her. At the same time, Nate's father searches the festival for Jules until he finally finds her. He begs her not to expose him, saying it would completely destroy his life and offering to do anything she wants. Jules tells him she has no intention of hurting him, apologizes for what she did, calls herself foolish, and promises it will never happen again. Relieved, he thanks her and walks away. Shortly after, Jules receives a message from Nate asking her to meet him in 30 minutes. Rue continues searching for her sister and finally finds her sitting with a group of boys who are using drugs. They mock Rue for being an addict, but she shuts them down, grabs her sister, and leaves. Cassie, now high, starts acting erratically in front of everyone. She becomes embarrassed when she notices people staring and laughing at her. Rue takes her sister home and promises not to tell their mother what she saw, warning her never to do it again. The two end up laughing and joking together. Later that night, Nate's father returns home, locks himself in his office, and is shocked to discover that Jules' explicit video is gone. Meanwhile, Jules goes to meet the person she's been talking to online, only to discover it's Nate. She tries to leave, but Nate stops her and threatens to release her explicit video if she ever exposes his father. Jules tells him she only sent the video to him and insists she'll tell everyone the truth anyway. Nate threatens her again, saying she'll never get into college or find a job, and that people will look at her with nothing but disgust wherever she goes. He then tells her she doesn't deserve that, calling her kind, smart, and deserving of a good life. He begs her not to destroy his life in exchange for leaving her alone. Furious, Jules insults him and says he's just like his father. Nate snaps, grabs her by the hair, then lets go and walks away. Jules completely breaks down and goes to Rue's house, asking to stay the night. Rue asks if she's okay and whether she met the guy she liked. Jules says he wasn't who she thought he was and starts crying. Rue hugs her tightly and comforts her. The episode then flashes back to Maddie's childhood. We see her dancing and singing in a competition, with everyone clearly impressed by her. That's why Maddie loved festivals and dreamed of becoming a beauty queen. However, her dream collapses when the pageant organizer is exposed for child abuse. Maddie falls into depression and isolates herself at home for a full week. We learn that Maddie's mother works at a nail salon while her father is unemployed. As a child, Maddie often went to work with her mother, quietly observing the wealthy women who came into the salon, paying close attention to how they dressed, how they spoke, and the lives they lived. As she grows older, it becomes clear that Maddie admired Nate long before they ever dated. She deliberately chose to be with him because he always paid attention to her, genuinely cared about her, and truly loved her. And she loved him too. Their relationship initially seemed healthy. However, it's revealed that Maddie wasn't always honest. She lied when she told Nate that he was the first man in her life. Over time, Maddie realizes that to get what she wants from Nate, she has to feed his ego and make him feel powerful and dominant. Even so, she understands who he really is, and it becomes clear that she's afraid of him, especially after the party when he choked her. In that moment, she felt sick and shaken, not simply because he was violent, but because she realized she was terrified of continuing to love him, despite everything he did to her. The next day, Nate's father is at work when his wife calls to tell him that the school has requested a meeting about their son. When he arrives at the school, the stress overwhelms him to the point that he has to rush to the bathroom and vomit. We learn that that Maddie returned to school after the party and tried to hide the marks on her neck. However, she collapses due to low blood pressure caused by the drugs she took that night. During the medical examination, staff noticed the bruises on her neck. The principal later calls Maddie into his office and asks about the marks, but she refuses to speak. Suspicious, the principal begins to suspect Nate. He reminds Maddie that she's a minor and explains that if there is evidence of abuse, the police must be notified. The school then starts questioning her classmates, and eventually, the principal contacts the police, who arrest Nate. Cassie is shocked when she learns from her sister that the entire school now knows Maddie found disturbing images on Nate's phone. At the same time, Kat runs into Ethan in class and decides to ignore him completely. Confused by her behavior and unaware of what he did wrong, Ethan tries to understand, but Kat refuses to explain anything. Despite Maddie crying and insisting that Nate did nothing wrong, her mother decides to accuse Nate of assault anyway. When Nate's father demands to speak with Maddie's family, the officer refuses and says he must speak with Nate first. Nate's father enters the room and asks his son directly if he choked Maddie. Nate hesitates and says, "Not exactly." His father repeats the question, making it clear he expects a denial. Nate understands and agrees to go along with it. His father reassures him, tells him to stay calm, and instructs him to walk out of the school with his head held high. As Nate is escorted out, the police arrest him. When he sees Maddie, he tells her that he loves her. Jules watches Nate leave with his father and becomes visibly shaken. Rue notices Jules's reaction and asks what's going on, questioning whether Nate found out about her connection to his father. Jules denies it and begs Rue not to mention the situation to anyone, even if Jules ends up hating her for it. Rue promises, but then casually suggests they could blackmail Nate's father for money. Jules is disturbed by the idea, snaps at Rue, says this isn't a joke, and walks away. At the police station, Maddie refuses to give her fingerprints. The investigator is forced to restrain her and take them anyway, warning her that someone who treats her this way does not truly love her. Meanwhile, Nate is questioned by the police. He denies choking Maddie, admits she was high that night, and claims his father always warned him about her behavior. He insists that he loves her despite knowing she had other relationships when they were apart. Even so, the school decides to suspend Nate until the investigation is complete, and he is also removed from the football team. Later, Rue meets Allie again, and it's clear they've become friends. Allie tells her that her relationship with Jules likely won't last and that they'll eventually drift apart when college comes. Rue becomes anxious and insists that Allie meet Jules someday. At the recovery center, Rue raises her hand to speak and finally admits the truth. She confesses that she lied when she said she had been sober for 60 days. She explains that she met someone who helped her deeply, and because of that person, she chose to quit using drugs. She acknowledges that her motivation may have been selfish. Turning to Ali, she admits he was right and that they probably will separate one day, but she desperately hopes he's wrong. She reveals that she's been sober for 13 days and that her life has already begun to improve, which is why she came to the meeting to finally tell the truth. After the meeting, Rue messages Lexi to apologize for the hurtful things she said before. She tells her she wants to fix their friendship and make things right. Meanwhile, McKay decides to reconcile with Cassie and apologizes for not standing up to Nate that day. Cassie admits she was hurt because she felt he wasn't proud of her. McKay reassures her, saying he is proud of her because she's his girlfriend and asks her to trust him. At home, Maddie gets into a heated argument with her mother, fiercely defending Nate and insisting that she's sure he loves her. Her mother refuses to listen and makes it clear she will not drop the case. Maddie gets upset, leaves the house, and storms out. She calls Kat and asks if she can stay over, but Kat apologizes and says she's busy because she's with the guy she met at the festival. Meanwhile, Rue goes out with Jules and Lexi, and the three of them play around and have fun. Later, Lexi tells Jules that Rue has been doing much better because of her. Jules becomes uncomfortable, quietly walks away, and hides in the bathroom. At the same time, Nate calls McKay and asks him to have Cassie message Maddie. Maddie feels relieved and happy when Nate reaches out and asks her to meet him at a hotel, which turns out to be the same hotel where his father cheats on his wife. When Maddie arrives, she hugs Nate and breaks down in tears. The story then flashes back to McKay's childhood. We see his father training him relentlessly. Although McKay resents the pressure, he understands that his father believes it's for his own good. McKay is talented, and his father teaches him how to control his anger so he won't lose everything. As McKay grows older, the strict routine pays off, and he's selected as one of the top American football players in college. However, once he actually gets there, McKay becomes discouraged when he realizes he isn't special anymore and that many players are just as good, if not better. Over time, he accepts that he'll never become a professional athlete. During that period, McKay starts falling for Cassie. even though he's bothered by the explicit videos of her circulating online and constantly wonders how someone could do that to herself, especially after she denied it at the festival. He's still drawn to her. McKay enjoys the way other guys look at him when he's with Cassie, as if her choosing him proves his worth. Back in the present, McKay goes to Cassie's house to take her to a Halloween party. He becomes upset when he sees what she's wearing and tells her he can't go out with her dressed like that because everyone will stare at him. He pressures her into wearing his football jersey instead. Later, we see Cassie alone at the party, wearing the outfit she actually likes. Daniel, the guy she met at the festival, tries to talk to her, but Cassie walks away. Kat is thrilled when her parents go on vacation and leave her home alone, giving her the freedom to work comfortably and increase her online income. Meanwhile, Rue feels hurt when Jules leaves her standing alone and starts drinking with Kat. At the same time, we see Nate out to dinner with his family. His father tells him to keep his head up as they walk in, but they're immediately stopped by the restaurant owner, who refuses to let them enter because of Nate. Worried about the restaurant's reputation, the owner turns them away. Furious, Nate snaps at his father, saying he never wanted to go out in the first place. We learn that Nate spends his first days after being suspended mostly at home, doing nothing except driving around aimlessly. Sometimes he checks on Maddie, meeting her weekly at the hotel, and it's also revealed that he's been watching Jules from a distance. At a party, Rue watches Jules drinking and dancing, and Lexi comments that Jules is clearly not acting like herself. While they're talking, Rue spots her sister sitting with a guy and using drugs. Enraged, Rue grabs him by his clothes and drags him away against his will. Cassie tries to reach out to McKay, sending him messages to apologize, but he responds coldly and says he's not interested in talking. Meanwhile, Rue and Lexi confront the guy who was with Rue's sister. Rue threatens him, saying she's been to rehab and met dangerous criminals there, warning that she'll unleash them on him if he ever gives her sister drugs again. She even threatens to have him stripped and beaten in front of his own house, then orders him to leave and tell her she's beautiful. Terrified, the guy obeys. Ethan shows up at the party and talks to Kat, telling her he wants to understand what happened at the festival, since she suddenly changed toward him for no clear reason. Kat clearly doesn't want to explain, admitting that she doesn't trust anyone. She questions why he even likes her. Ethan is confused and says it's because they went out before and had fun together, but Kat doesn't believe him and assumes he just wants a relationship. Later, Rue runs into Fesco at the party and apologizes for what she said to him earlier. Fesco responds that she's an addict and that he's learned never to trust what addicts say. Rue tells him she genuinely wants to make things right because he's her friend and she cares about him. Fesco tells her he cares about her too and promises to always support her as a friend. He asks how she's feeling now that her body is clean. Rue admits she feels like she's addicted to something new, that happiness feels good, but sadness feels unbearable. At the same time, Daniel tries to get closer to Cassie. She allows it and dances with him, partly because things with McKay have become strained after his college friends mocked and beat him in front of her. Since then, McKay has felt humiliated and ashamed, especially because he froze and cried instead of defending himself. Jules gets drunk and falls into the pool, starting to ramble and say strange things. Rue tries to stop her and begs her to get out of the water, but suddenly Jules pulls Rue into the pool as well. Rue panics, feels like she's choking, rushes out of the water, and locks herself in the bathroom, breaking down in tears. At the same time, McKay arrives at the party and keeps texting Cassie, but she doesn't see his messages. When Lexi notices him, she also texts Cassie to tell her he's there, but Cassie still doesn't see anything because she's in a bedroom with Daniel. McKay searches for Cassie, but just before he opens the room they're in, Lexi stops him and lies, telling him that her sister already went home and probably fell asleep. Inside the room, Cassie tries to push Daniel away and tells him she doesn't want to cheat on her boyfriend. Daniel gets offended and insults her, saying she's the one who came onto him first and always hides behind her boyfriend as an excuse. He angrily tells her that no one will ever truly care about her and that all he wants from her is one thing. Hurt and humiliated, Cassie breaks down, leaves the party, and walks away in tears. When Rue comes out of the bathroom, she says she wants to leave and tells Lexi that she's nothing but a burden. Lexi hugs her tightly and begs her not to say that. Later, when McKay gets home, he finally opens up to his father and admits the truth, that he will never become a professional athlete because he's simply not the best. His father refuses to accept that, warning him that giving in to doubt will destroy him. Elsewhere, Nate threatens the guy he previously attacked, forcing him to go to the police station and confess that he fought with Maddie and choked her at the festival. Nate warns him that if he doesn't comply, he'll accuse him of trying to rape a minor. Terrified, the guy goes to the police and falsely confesses. Maddie then testifies against him, claiming he was the one who choked her. At the same time, Jules goes to the police station and testifies that she witnessed the guy choking Maddie. It's later revealed that Nate forced Jules to do this by threatening to expose her and release her explicit images. Jules is visibly shaken when she later sees Nate with Maddie at the party after he's cleared of all charges. The story flashes back to Cassie's childhood. We see her at one of her birthday parties and learn that her father was extremely attractive, drawing attention from many women, which made her mother deeply jealous and constantly fighting with him, despite the fact that he loved her. Cassie's father adored her and wanted her to become a competitive figure skater. Cassie believed she could go professional because she was talented, but her father couldn't afford the training and eventually stopped encouraging her. As Cassie grows older, she becomes very close to her mother, who clearly struggles with her own issues. A massive argument later erupts between Cassie and her father, leading him to leave the house. Cassie is devastated when she discovers her mother had been lying and that her father left because her mother was cheating. Over time, Cassie realizes her father wasn't perfect either. He begins visiting her and her sister once a week, but those visits slowly fade away until they don't hear from him for a long time. One day, they learn that he was in a car accident caused by drunk driving. Despite everything, Cassie refuses to give up hope, believing her father will recover and get his life back on track. She secretly keeps contacting him behind her mother's back, but he eventually stops responding. On Cassie's birthday, he suddenly reappears and asks to see her. When she meets him, she's terrified to see that he's become a drug addict. She realizes he only wanted to see her so he could steal items from the house and sell them. Her father breaks down in tears and begs her not to tell anyone. Cassie promises, but she never sees him again after that. Cassie continues with her life and starts dating anyone who shows interest in her, smart or foolish, kind or cruel. They all ask her for the same thing, to take pictures of her. Cassie is horrified when she first sees her images online and even considers ending her life, but eventually she grows numb, fully aware of what people intend to do with her. Later, she meets McKay, who genuinely loves her for who she is, at least until the night of the party. Cassie is shocked when she gets home that night and discovers she's pregnant. After the party, Rue isolates herself in her room, binge watching the same TV show for nearly 22 hours over the course of 2 days. Rue knows she's depressed whenever she locks herself in her room and refuses to even use the bathroom. When she finally tries to get up, she's in severe pain. Jules also isolates herself for an entire week after leaving the police station, refusing to answer Rue's calls or messages. Rue begins to realize that everything somehow connects back to Nate. Determined to uncover the truth, she asks Lexi for help. What starts as curiosity quickly turns into obsession. Rue barely sleeps as she digs deeper, beginning to suspect that Jules is in love with Nate and that he's the same person Jules had been talking to online. Rue pieces everything together and realizes that Nate was using the name of the guy who went to jail. The same guy everyone knew didn't actually rape Maddie because they had all seen him at the party. Rue becomes so consumed by the investigation that she stays up all night and calls Lexi at 2 a.m, explaining that Nate chose Jules because he was attracted to her. Rue talks nonstop until Lexi finally cuts her off, telling her she's emotionally overwhelmed by the case, then hangs up. Cassie gathers her friends and tells them she needs their advice on 2 things. She asks whether she should tell McKay that she slept with Daniel, explaining that she feels guilty and doesn't want to lie to him. Everyone immediately tells her not to confess. Around the same time, Kat remembers that she hooked up with Daniel on Halloween and was shocked when she realized he didn't even remember her. It turns out Daniel was the same boy who liked her back in middle school, but left her after she gained weight. Kat speaks up and tells Cassie that she doesn't need to confess because the relationship probably won't last forever anyway. Maddie snaps at her, calling her a terrible friend. Kat fires back, saying she doesn't care about Maddie or her stories about her abusive boyfriend. Maddie retaliates by saying Kat has been acting strange ever since she changed the way she dresses, adding that she misses the old Kat, the one who wasn't a slut. Deeply hurt, Kat storms out, crying the entire way home. Rue sinks back into depression after her manic episode and begins to suspect that she may be bipolar. When Nate gets home, he talks to his father, admitting that he's not perfect, but that he's trying to improve. His father tells him he doesn't care how Nate got out of the case, but warns him that he needs to be more careful from now on and stop making mistakes. Nate says nothing and retreats to his room. Rue continues to suffer physically, refusing to use the bathroom. When she goes into the kitchen, she runs into her mother's new boyfriend, who tries to make small talk and asks about Jules. Rue snaps at him, telling him he will never replace her father, then walks away. Rue's manic episode returns, and she goes to Fezco asking for a gun so she can threaten Nate and force him to talk. Fezco is stunned and tells her it's the dumbest thing he's ever heard. While they're talking, Fezco gets a message from his drug supplier, who's coming over to drop off merchandise. Nervous, Fezco tells Rue to stay locked in the room and not come out no matter what. Left alone, Rue grows anxious when she notices his grandmother's medication. She hallucinates the drugs calling out to her, begging her to take them. Overwhelmed, Rue sneaks out of the room. Fezco panics when he realizes she's gone, but Rue manages to escape unnoticed. When Rue gets home, she falls back into depression, locks herself in her room, and turns on the same TV show again. Meanwhile, Jules travels to visit a friend to clear her head. She's happy there, especially as her friend does her makeup and listens while Jules opens up about her relationships. Cassie finally decides to tell McKay the truth and reveals that she's pregnant. McKay panics and tells her that if his parents find out, his life will be over. He insists she needs to get an abortion because his future will be destroyed. Cassie is heartbroken and tells him she just wanted time to think. McKay hugs her and softly tells her that one day she'll be the best mother in the world. Later, Nate shows up at Fezco's store to buy something. Fezco warns him to stay away from Rue. Nate asks if they're involved, but Fezco says Rue is family to him. Nate mocks him, calling him pathetic and saying he shouldn't pretend he's some kind of gang leader. Fezco snaps and threatens to kill him if he ever comes near them again. Rue collapses in pain from kidney issues, unable to go to the bathroom, and falls to the floor. At the same time, Nate calls the police and reports Fezco. Realizing what's happening, Fezco immediately flushes all his drugs down the toilet. Cassie wakes her mother in tears and begs her for help as she clings to her. Rue lies on the floor until her mother finds her, lifts her up, and bathes her, knowing exactly what's happening to her. Her mother feels hopeful, believing this pain means Rue is truly recovering from addiction. She hugs her and reassures her that things will get better. Feeling guilty, Jules messages Rue to tell her she misses her. The next day, Rue is taken to the hospital. A nurse offers her pain medication, but Rue lies and asks for something stronger. The doctor recognizes the signs of addiction and prescribes a mild painkiller instead. Rue is strangely happy in the hospital, admitting she feels calm there and never anxious. Jules visits Rue at the hospital and asks if everything happened because of her. Rue tells her that this is who she's always been, but that Jules makes her life better. Jules apologizes. After Rue is discharged, Jules helps her get ready for the dance, does her makeup, and tells her about the trip to see her friend, insisting they should all meet someday. Rue then learns everything Nate did to Jules and wishes she could kill him. They head to the dance, and Rue's mother takes photos of them before they leave. We see Cassie's mother encouraging her to go to the dance, telling her not to worry and to hold her head high. Kat feels insecure about her outfit and asks her mother if it looks bad. Her mother smiles and reassures her that it's fine. Nate gets ready and meets the girl he's taking to the dance, and his parents clearly approve of her. At the dance, Maddie arrives and sits with her friends as they talk about high school and what comes next. Jules comments that high school feels miserable. Maddie grows upset when she sees Nate with his new girlfriend. We learn they broke up again after Nate became violent with her once more. Maddie sneaks away and steals the explicit video of Nate's father from his office. As she leaves, Nate's father confronts her and tells her to stay away from his son, saying their relationship won't last. Maddie insults his entire family, calls them twisted, and walks away. Determined to hurt Nate, Maddie dances with another guy at the party. Kat jokes with the girls, saying Nate and Maddie are perfect for each other and imagining them getting married and divorced 3 times. Kat later approaches Ethan and finally opens up. She admits she got upset when she saw him talking to another girl at the festival and decided to hurt him before he could hurt her. Ethan tells her he liked her from the moment he saw her and admits they could hurt each other, but promises he'll make sure he's the one who gets hurt, not her. Moved by his words, Kat cries and Ethan kisses her. Meanwhile, Rue dances with Jules, the two of them laughing and happy. When Nate steps outside, Rue follows him and warns him to stay away from her friends, or she'll go to the police and expose his father as a predator. Nate dismisses her and says says Jules hasn't told her everything. He admits he's actually drawn to Jules because of her intelligence and ambition and insists she'll achieve great things. Rue is shaken when Nate tells her that Jules is going to leave town and that 10 years from now, she won't even remember her. We then see Nate earlier after returning to football. His performance is poor at first, but he eventually pulls himself together and wins. Back home, his father tells him that winning doesn't mean he played well and that with this attitude, he'll never be a true team leader. Enraged, Nate moves toward his father, who warns him to back away. Nate suddenly attacks him, but his father manages to overpower him. Nate collapses when he sees himself in the mirror, screaming and slamming his head against the wall. Terrified, his father backs away and leaves him alone. Fezco decides to rob a wealthy doctor to cover the cost of the drugs he flushed down the toilet. He breaks into the man's house, pulls a gun on him, and forces him to open the safe. In that moment, Fezco notices the doctor's young son standing nearby, which makes him hesitate. Suddenly, the doctor pulls a gun on Fezco, but Fezco manages to overpower him. He beats the doctor brutally, takes the money, and escapes. Meanwhile, Rue talks to Jules and suggests that they leave town together and disappear. Jules agrees immediately. The two ride their bikes together, laughing and feeling free. At the same time, Cassie decides to have an abortion and goes to the hospital with her mother and sister. She is terrified, but she goes through with it. Jules returns home and starts packing her clothes. Rue hesitates and asks whether what they're about to do is really the right choice. Elsewhere, Nate is at the dance and asks Maddie to dance with him. She agrees, but tells him she hates him and that he's abusive and unstable. Nate calmly says he knows. Maddie breaks down in tears and tells him they need to let each other go. Nate kisses her forehead and tells her he knows that too. Fezco makes it back home and finds the drug dealer waiting for him. The dealer is shocked when Fezco hands over the money and notices that it's covered in blood. Deciding not to kill him, the dealer takes the cash and leaves. Rue and Jules head to the train station, planning to leave together, but Rue becomes overwhelmed with doubt. She tells Jules it's a bad idea and that her mother and sister would be devastated if she disappeared. Jules tries to encourage her, insisting they'll figure things out, but Rue stands her ground. She lets Jules leave alone and breaks down in tears as the train pulls away. After returning home, Rue attends a recovery meeting with her mother. She's deeply affected when she hears her mother talk about Rue's addiction and the constant fear of losing her. Rue begins to remember the endless fights with her mother, everything that spiraled after her father's death, and the moment she took his jacket and started wearing it everywhere. That grief slowly destroyed her life, pulling her deeper into addiction. As those memories flood back, Rue feels completely disconnected from reality, as if she no longer exists on the ground, like she's walking on the walls instead of the floor. Season 2 kicks off exactly where we left off. Mouse is aggressively interrogating Fezco, demanding to know where this blood-soaked cash came from. And right at that critical, heart-stopping moment, Ashtray appears out of nowhere, ambushing them both with a hammer. Mouse drops to the floor like a sack of bricks, dead on the spot, while his partner gets his nose absolutely obliterated from the blows. Fast forward a few days. The surviving partner drags them to meet a brand new supplier. This woman doesn't mess around. She forces them to strip completely naked just to make absolutely sure they aren't wearing a wire for the cops. And Rue? In a desperate, rock-bottom attempt to score some drugs, she literally insists on tagging along. The sit-down starts off incredibly tense, practically dripping with violence. But after they explain the whole mess with Mouse, the new boss agrees to sell them the product, using the very cash they stole from the doctor. Skip ahead a week later. There's a massive party and Rue shows up hoping to just zone out and clear her head. But she definitely didn't factor in Jules being there. So panic mode sets in and Rue tries to hide to dodge what would be a brutally awkward encounter. She wanders aimlessly through the house until she bumps into a guy chilling in the laundry room. This kid is casually snorting cocaine, and as if it's some stroke of genius, Rue decides to do a line right then and there, literally seconds after doing heroin. That lethal mix instantly triggers a terrifying physical reaction. The guy scrambles to check her pulse, but he can barely feel a heartbeat. She's fading fast. In that do-or-die moment, Rue manages to gasp out a plea, telling him to find a specific pill hidden inside her sock. He finds it, frantically crushes it up using the screen of his phone, and gets her to snort it. A few agonizing minutes pass, and she finally stabilizes. She's awake, sure, but tragically, she's sinking deeper into her addiction than ever before. Meanwhile, at a nearby gas station, Nate randomly bumps into Cassie. She's been feeling totally lost and vulnerable ever since Chris dumped her. And of course, Nate preys right on that weakness. He offers her a ride to the party, and the second they get there, they lock themselves in the bathroom to hook up. But a little while later, Maddie completely ruins the moment. She starts aggressively banging on the door, screaming to be let in. Cassie absolutely panics and immediately bursts into tears. Maddie is her ride-or-die best friend, and Cassie knows damn well that if Maddie finds out she's sleeping with her boyfriend, the fallout is going to be catastrophic. Maddie is losing her patience fast, so Nate has no choice but to open the door and let her in. He smoothly slips out, using the excuse that he'll wait for her in the kitchen for 2 minutes because he has something important to tell her. While Maddie uses the toilet, Cassie is literally cowering behind the shower curtain, holding her breath and trying her absolute hardest not to make a single sound. The second they leave, she sneaks out of the bathroom, only to run dead into Nate and Chris. The tension is just off the charts. Chris pulls her aside to talk in private, trying to patch things up between them. But Cassie? She is more conflicted and terrified than ever. By the time Jules finally tracks Rue down, she's sitting outside by the fire pit, smoking weed. That makes it the third different substance she's done in under an hour. Jules is absolutely heartbroken and asks her, "When did you relapse?" Rue, brutally honest, confesses that it all started the exact moment Jules left her at the train station and rode off. Shortly after, Ashtray shows up, gives Rue a silent nod, and she gets up and walks away. Inside the house, Fezco is just wrapping up a conversation with Lexi, who's genuinely starting to fall for him. He walks with a dead serious purpose straight over to Nate. He reminds him of his old promise to kill him, and then smashes a glass bottle right over Nate's head. Immediately after, he just goes totally savage, beating the living daylights out of him in front of the entire party, until both of his fists are completely drenched in blood. Chris jumps in to break up the massacre, but the damage is already done. There is no going back now. Right then, it hits Rue. The guilt sets in. Her one job was to distract Chris so Fezco could take out Nate, but because she was busy making out with Jules, she completely forgot about the plan. Cassie is the first one to rush in and help carry Nate to get him to the ER. But during the whole ride there, she is acting super sketchy. Maddie definitely notices it. She realizes her best friend is way too invested and terrified for her boyfriend's life. And even though Nate's face is completely mangled, Rue's heart is actually starting to heal. She and Jules are finally back together for real. And for the first time in a very long time, Rue is genuinely smiling again. As for Maddie, she spends 2 whole days just sobbing over Nate's condition. At the same time, Cassie cannot get him out of her head either. But obviously, she can't just ask about him directly without raising some major red flags. So, she asks Kat to do her a solid. Kat promises to get the intel, even though she is drowning in her own drama. She has a boyfriend now, and keeping her secret identity as an online dominatrix under wraps, it's getting harder than ever. Plus, Kat keeps having these bizarre hallucinations where Viking warriors literally murder her boyfriend and then take her by force. Nate gets discharged from the hospital 3 days later, and Cassie starts calling him obsessively at all hours. He gets so annoyed that he flat out warns her to knock it off, or else Maddie is eventually going to find out and absolutely wipe the floor with her. That same afternoon, Cal pays the girls a visit. He threatens to get the cops involved if Cassie doesn't tell him exactly who attacked his son. And Cassie? Desperate to win over her future father-in-law, she actually snitches on Fezco. This sparks a massive blowout argument with her sister, Lexi, who still thought Fezco was just this sweet guy who genuinely cared about her. Far away from all that drama, Rue is spending more and more time with the guy from the laundry room. His name is Elliot, and since he always has drugs on hand, they become instant besties. But when Elliot finally meets Jules, Rue introduces her as just a friend. She was nervous, feeling like she wasn't ready to announce their relationship to the world, which Jules did not take well at all, even though she decided to hide her frustration for the moment. While Rue is trying to fix things with Jules, sneaking out in the dead of night to go see her, she accidentally spots Cassie. Cassie is totally sneaking out of her house to hop into Nate's truck. Nate is purposely ignoring Maddie's endless phone calls while he's with Cassie, but that doesn't make Cassie regret what they're doing one bit. To her, Nate is her literal dream guy, and she convinces herself he is worth any risk. At the same time, Lexi gets all dressed up and goes to visit Fezco at his store. And this happens at the exact same moment Cal shows up, completely dead set on avenging his son. Cal stands right in front of Fezco, staring him down with this terrifying icy glare for a few seconds. Then, he reaches into his jacket in a totally menacing way. Behind the shelves, Ash already has his finger on the trigger, locked and loaded. But Cal? He simply pulls out a bill, pays for a bag of gummy bears, and walks out without saying a single word. Still, that brief encounter was more than enough for Fezco to know he needs to be on high alert. When he heads to the back of the house, he grabs his gun and stands guard. In the middle of the night, Cal waits for Nate in his room and confronts him. He demands to know why a drug dealer would beat him like that, and if he's tangled up in some shady business, that could ruin his future forever. Nate, who at this point has absolutely zero fear or respect left for his dad, breaks it down with ice in his veins. He drops the bomb that he knows all about Cal's sick secret with Jules, and that she spilled the tea to all her friends, including the drug dealer who beat him up. Nate spins this wild story about how the dealer tried to blackmail him, but he stood his ground, basically painting himself as the lone hero protecting the family's honor. In a split second, Nate completely flips the script. He piles all the moral guilt right onto Cal, who, absolutely terrified of the fallout, offers to clean up the mess. But then Nate drops the ultimate bombshell. The disc with the Jules video, it's gone. And he assures his dad that he knows exactly who stole it. In the very next scene, we get a major flashback to see Cal's origin story. Back in high school, he was the ultra-popular jock and the star of the wrestling team alongside his best friend, Derek. With all that clout came a lot of attention from the girls. But Cal was already dealing with some deeply confusing, intense feelings for Derek. He looked at him differently, even if he didn't have the guts to actually confess it. Shortly after, he meets Marcia, a girl with a bit more experience who kind of guides his romantic awakening and teaches him how to fit into the perfect little mold society expects of him. His dad, a super strict guy who was already side-eyeing Cal and Derek's closeness. So, seeing Cal with Marcia was a massive relief for him. He even invites her over for an official family dinner, essentially sealing Cal's fate forever. As time goes on, Cal tries his hardest to bury his true feelings, focusing purely on Marcia. They're hooking up everywhere they possibly can. But then, one night, while driving to a party with Derek, a massive storm forces them to pull over. Since Cal is driving a topless Jeep, they scramble for shelter and run into the only place open on the road, a gay bar. Inside, after knocking back a few drinks, they hit the dance floor. At first, they're just goofing off, kind of mocking the older guys in the bar. But the joke fades fast. The dancing gets way more personal, heavily charged with tension and desire. Finally, Cal leans in and kisses his best friend. And instead of pulling away, Derek kisses him right back with the exact same passion. The very next morning, while he's battling a hangover and spinning from this crazy emotional high, Cal gets a phone call from Marcia that alters the course of his entire life. Her period is late. She took 3 pregnancy tests, and they all came back positive. The news drops like a nuclear bomb at the absolute worst possible time. In a fraction of a second, his promising wrestling career and any dream of a future with Derek completely evaporate. Cal finds himself totally trapped, pushed into a shotgun marriage with Marcia, and forced to live out a cookie-cutter life he never actually chose. Flashing back to the present, Jules finally decides to let Elliot into their inner circle, but not before subjecting him to a full-blown interrogation. She needs to be absolutely sure that his intentions with Rue are strictly platonic and that he's not trying to use her. Once Jules's paranoia finally fades, the two girls officially get back together, being intimate for the first time in months. But despite all that, Rue is still keeping up the dangerous, massive lie that she's completely sober. In reality, the second she gets home, she pulls out that tiny tin of heroin she swiped from Fezco. She takes a meticulously calculated dose, just enough to keep the high going without setting off any alarms or raising suspicion. And while Rue is practically drowning in a sea of sedative-induced hallucinations, Cassie is spiraling into a total obsession with one single goal, winning Nate's love. For months, she has been mentally taking notes, dissecting every single comment Maddie has ever made about what her boyfriend likes. With a routine bordering on actual insanity, Cassie starts waking up at 3 a.m. every single day just to nail the flawless look that might catch Nate's eye. She's experimenting with specific color palettes, super elaborate hairstyles, and even switching up her wardrobe to be a bit more conservative. Her first 3 attempts, a total crushing failure. Nate just breezes right past her in the school hallways without giving her a second glance. But the moment Cassie decides to literally copy Maddie's exact style and aesthetic down to the letter, she finally gets him to look. And even though, in public, she is still completely invisible to him, behind closed doors, he seeks her out every single night to hook up. They even start getting creative, meeting up in some incredibly risky spots, like the half-finished construction site owned by his dad's company. As for Rue, after 6 days of stretching that tiny box to its absolute limit, She finally hits empty. She heads back to Fezco, practically begging for more. But Fez isn't changing his mind. To him, Rue is a walking, breathing nightmare, and he's not about to waste another cent fueling her addiction. Just like that, that door is slammed shut for good. On the brink of a total breakdown from withdrawal, Rue starts plotting. She decides to go over Fez's head straight to the source. She cleans herself up, puts on a formal outfit, and pays a visit to Lori Jane, the queen bee of the drug trade. And surprisingly, Lori decides to give her a shot. She fronts Rue $10,000 worth of pills to sell. To a high-level player like Lori, that sum is pocket change. But before Rue leaves, she gets a warning that'll freeze your blood. Lori knows Rue is smart, but she also knows she's a junkie. She makes it crystal clear. If Rue messes this up, they'll kill her and sell her body or her organs, whichever is in better condition. No matter what, the house always wins. Rue finally feels the weight of the danger she's in, but she still walks out of there on a total cloud nine because she finally has her own massive inventory. Meanwhile, Cal is living in a state of pure obsession, trying to track down that tape. He knows that if that video ever sees the light of day, his entire life is over. He's even seriously considering checking out for good. While he's staking out Fezco's house, Ash catches him in his blind spot, shoving a shotgun in his face. He's dragged inside and beaten until he's a bloody mess. Desperate and broken, Cal confesses he's just looking for the disc, swearing Nate told him they had it. But Fezco couldn't care less about his tape. He sets the record straight. He beat Nate because he snitched to the cops. He looks Cal in the eye and tells him plain and simple, he's a dealer, not a pervert. Cal realizes he messed up and tries to throw money at them to buy their silence about the video with Jules. But Fez doesn't take the bait. He just tells him to keep his sick son away from his friends and lets him walk. When night finally hits, Rue locks herself in her room, cracks open that suitcase full of pills, and goes on an absolute ruthless bender. And just a few blocks away, Cassie is waiting on pins and needles for Nate to pick her up. But tragically, she's waiting for a ghost. He decided to ditch her and ride out with Maddie instead. Because Rue is completely blasted and checked out of reality 24/7, she starts blowing off her meetups with Jules and Elliot. She simply doesn't want them seeing her in that messed up state. But her ghosting them pushes Jules and Elliot to spend a ton of time alone together. And they quickly realize they vibe and have way more chemistry than they ever expected. As the days roll by, Maddie gets her signature glow back. Nate is right by her side again, and the two of them reclaim their throne as the school's ultimate power couple. But this completely destroys Cassie, because she was actually falling hard for him and getting deeply hooked on the relationship. A few days later, Cassie agrees to meet up with Nate one more time. But this time, she confronts him. She hits him with a brutal ultimatum. He has to pick one of them. And when Nate chooses Maddie without even a single second of hesitation, Cassie totally snaps. She goes into a full-blown hysterical meltdown, screaming at the top of her lungs. Nate gets completely fed up with the crazy drama and tells her to get lost. But she fires back with a dark, terrifying promise. She will do whatever it takes in this world to keep Maddie away from him. Out in the garage, Cal is completely losing his grip on reality. Blind, drunk, and spiraling, he decides to take his beat-up old Jeep for a joyride, desperate to chase the ghost of those simpler days. He's tearing down the highway at breakneck speeds, violently swerving between lanes, all while casually swigging from a bottle of whiskey, taking his eyes off the road in a genuinely terrifying way. Minutes later, he pulls up to the exact same gay bar where he danced with Derek all those years ago. The second he walks through the doors, he heads straight to the jukebox, cues up that exact same song from that fateful night, and just absolutely loses himself in the music. He is out there dancing in front of everyone, even letting some younger guy pull him in close. But the high doesn't last. He spirals out of control fast, his behavior gets dangerously erratic, and the bouncers end up violently throwing him out into the street. A little while later, Cal stumbles back home, making an absolute scene, and literally pisses right on the foyer floor. When his family wakes up, horrified and in total shock, he unleashes a brutal, savage wave of honesty. He lays it all out, exposing his double life and his dark obsession with hooking up with younger guys. He doesn't stop there. He publicly humiliates Marcia, dropping the bomb that he knows exactly what she's been doing with other men on Facebook. And honestly, he doesn't even care. But what actually makes his blood boil is the fact that they operate like enemies, constantly lying and betraying each other under the same roof. He swears that the charade, this whole fake, picture-perfect lie, ends tonight. Cal makes one final, chilling admission. His biggest regret was never getting close to Nate. He looks right at his son, admitting that Nate has turned into an absolute monster, and that he, as a father, is directly responsible for creating him. He promises to come back in the morning so they can talk it out calmly. If Marcia wants a divorce, she's got it. But if they actually want to keep living as a family, it's going to be strictly on his terms, because he is done suffocating in this lie. Right around that same time, Cassie is going through her own catastrophic meltdown. Blackout drunk, she's dancing hysterically in the middle of the living room while the rest of the girls watch her in deep concern, fully aware that something inside of her has completely shattered. Nate shows up shortly after, and with absolute chilling coldness, he just strolls right past her to chill with the girls in the hot tub. From across the house, Cassie watches him through tear-filled eyes, feeling her entire universe crumble to pieces, while he acts like absolutely nothing happened between them. A minute later, a desperate Cassie climbs into the hot tub with them. But the second she hears Maddie happily gushing about all her beautiful, romantic future plans with Nate, the crippling guilt, mixed with all that alcohol, hits her like a freight train. Her stomach completely turns, and the whole tense moment ends with her violently throwing up all over the water, instantly ruining the entire night. Right around that time, Elliot and Jules are right on the verge of hooking up. But suddenly, Elliot decides to drop a massive truth bomb. He confesses that Rue hasn't been sober for a single day since he met her. He reveals that she is actually using stuff way heavier and harder than anyone realizes. And he knows this for a terrifying fact because his own dad looked the exact same way right before he died. At that very moment, we see Rue experiencing this brutally painful hallucination. She is literally attending her own funeral. All her friends are standing there, and so is her dad, the one she tragically lost to cancer years ago. The very next morning, reality hits her like an absolute freight train. Her mom bursts into her bedroom while Rue is still heavily under the influence. Rue wakes up in a sheer panic, frantically tearing the room apart, desperately searching for that suitcase full of drugs, but it is completely gone. An incredibly violent blowout erupts. Rue totally loses her mind, screaming right in her mom's face that she wishes she had died instead of her dad. And right in the middle of this absolute chaos, Rue crosses the ultimate line and physically strikes her little sister, Gia. That hit? That is the absolute last straw. Her mom hits her right back to stop her in her tracks, aggressively shoves her out into the hall, and locks herself and Gia safely inside, leaving Rue completely isolated in her own desperate madness. Rue starts viciously kicking the door with pure rage until she literally breaks it down. She spirals so far out of control that she actually threatens to kill her own family if they don't hand over the pills. But soon enough, the adrenaline crashes hard, and she collapses in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably in a way that just breaks your heart. Right there on the floor, she confesses the terrifying dark truth. That suitcase didn't belong to her, and the dealers are going to murder her if she doesn't bring it back. But her mom stands her ground and refuses to cave. And the exact second Rue realizes that those drugs are truly gone for good, she snaps right back into that violent, terrifying rage. In the kitchen, she is absolutely blindsided by Jules, who tries to talk to her. But Rue is literally in full-on self-destruct mode. With pure, unadulterated venom, she screams at her, telling Jules she is the absolute worst thing that has ever happened to her, and that snitching to her mom was an unforgivable betrayal. She looks her dead in the eye and tells her she is completely dead to her and hopes to never, ever see her again. A life that, according to Rue, might not even last another 2 weeks. Because that is exactly how much time she has before Lori comes collecting the drug money her mom just flushed down the toilet. A little while later, her mom forces her into the car to take her to rehab, and Elliot shows up to say goodbye. At first, Rue actually seems to accept that she needs help, but the closer they get to the clinic, the anxiety just completely eats her alive. She coldly starts breaking down her true master plan. She was going to consume every single drug in that suitcase over the next few days. She tells them she would have died completely happy after having the greatest month of her entire life. But now, they completely ruined everything. And the second her mom looks away, Rue bails out of the moving car and sprints down the street like a complete maniac. After nearly getting run over by oncoming traffic, she manages to lose them in the chaos and makes a beeline straight for Fezco's house. But she finds the place totally empty, so she aimlessly wanders the streets until she ends up at Lexi's house. Her plan is to just lay low for a bit, and while she's at it, steal some of her best friend's mom's prescription pills to feed the excruciating withdrawals that are tearing her body apart. When she doesn't find anything heavy enough in the medicine cabinet, she decides to swipe some gold earrings to pawn off. But as she walks downstairs to the living room, she walks right into an ambush. Lexi's mom was one step ahead and had already called Rue's mom. The rest of the girls show up to stage an impromptu intervention, but Rue does not care at all about anyone's help or support. And in a move of pure, calculated malice, just to deflect the attention off herself, she publicly exposes Cassie. She drops the massive bomb that she saw her climbing into Nate's truck in the dead of night. And right then and there, Maddie completely loses her mind and lunges straight at Cassie. Right in the middle of all that chaos and fighting, Rue uses the massive distraction to bolt and make another run for Fezco's house. And this time, he's actually there. Almost immediately, Rue pretends she needs to use the bathroom, but in reality, she starts tearing the place apart, desperately looking to steal absolutely anything she can get her hands on. But Fez has way too much experience dealing with junkies. He sees right through her in seconds. Deeply hurt by his friend's ultimate betrayal, he ruthlessly kicks her out onto the street without a second thought. All alone and drowning in total despair, Rue hides out until some neighbors open their garage. And she sneaks right in, driven purely by her manic, overwhelming need for a fix. Rue breaks into a total stranger's house to swipe jewelry, cash, or literally anything of value she can grab. But the homeowners suddenly return early, forcing her to dive out the window and make a run for it. They call the cops immediately, and within seconds, Rue finds herself sprinting down pitch-black alleys while police cruisers sweep the entire area with their sirens blaring. A patrol car spots her in a parking garage, kicking off a completely suicidal chase right onto the busy highway. She's dodging fast-moving traffic, weaving between cars, and causing multiple crashes in her wake. Fueled entirely by pure survival instinct, Rue is jumping fences into backyards, completely ruining a private party by sprinting right through the guests and weaving through narrow service alleys. The cops are hot on her trail. But after a grueling, bone-crushing sprint and getting sliced up by broken glass, Rue finally manages to lose them, hiding out inside a foul-smelling dumpster. And even with a severely busted ankle, she somehow manages to drag herself all the way to Lori Jane's house. Once there, she hands over the stolen jewelry and cash, which barely scrapes together around $3,000. But she knows damn well that doesn't even cover half of the massive debt she owes. Despite the massive mountain of debt hanging over her head, Lori Jane actually plays the part of the caring savior. She helps Rue into a warm bath, but the absolute second Rue lets her guard down, Lori shoots her up with an IV dose of morphine. The effect is terrifyingly instant. Rue plunges into a deep, heavy sleep, and the agonizing physical pain of her battered body fades away, at least for a little while. Caught in this sedated trance, she gets hit with these deeply emotional flashbacks of the moments she shared with her dad, right down to the totally heartbreaking instant she had to deliver the eulogy at his funeral. But against all odds, Rue opens her eyes. She wakes up, still alive inside Lori's house. Without making a single sound, she creeps through the dead quiet house until she spots an open window. And in a sheer act of desperation, she leaps straight from the second floor to make her escape. About an hour later, she miraculously makes it back home. But her hands are so brutally cramped and locked up from the lingering drugs and extreme exhaustion, she literally can't even perform a task as simple as unwrapping a piece of candy. To make matters worse, the rehab center calls with an update. A bed won't open up for another week. That means Rue has absolutely no choice but to white-knuckle her way through forced sobriety, facing the brutal, savage nightmare of withdrawals. By day 3, Rue finally starts seeking out some forgiveness. She calls Ali, her NA sponsor, to apologize for the vicious insults she threw at him before. And Ali? He actually accepts her apology, even agreeing to come over, cook a huge meal for the family, and stand right by her side to support her on the brutal road to recovery. On the flip side, Maddie is laying in bed, just holding the disc, coldly calculating the perfect revenge against Nate. She knows damn well she could absolutely destroy him by going to the cops, but her mind is searching for something way more creative and a lot more painful. Meanwhile, over at Cassie's house, things are getting seriously alarming. Her mom is sick with worry, literally hiding every single knife in the kitchen, terrified that her daughter's massive mental breakdown is going to push her to self-harm. And her worst fears are totally confirmed when Cassie actually tries to slit her wrists using a corkscrew. Lexi catches her in the act, and with her classic cynicism, secretly thanks God that her sister is pretty but stupid. A little later, Lexi heads over to Fezco's to drop some major news. The school officially approved her play. The entire production is basically ripped straight from Cassie's life. And Lexi is convinced that if her sister actually sees the ending, she's going to be looking for something a hell of a lot sharper than a corkscrew. During their chat, Fezco finally spills the real reason why he beat Nate to a pulp. And once Lexi sees the genuine nobility behind what he did, she starts looking at him with total admiration. As for Nate, the vibe at his house has completely flipped 180 degrees. His mom wakes up in a fantastic mood, having a little whiskey for breakfast, and it looks like the whole family is finally breathing a massive sigh of relief now that Cal isn't around to suffocate them with his fake morality. But that calm, it is totally deceiving. That night, Nate goes out for a drive with a loaded gun sitting right in the passenger seat. With no clear destination at first, he eventually ends up sneaking straight into Maddie's bedroom. Zero hesitation. No sweet talk. Nate operates with terrifying stone-cold precision. He leaves a single bullet in the cylinder and plays a literal game of Russian roulette, pointing the gun right at Maddie until she finally completely breaks down in sheer panic and confesses she has the disc. After getting exactly what he came for, he heads home with this eerie, unsettling calmness, leaving Maddie completely paralyzed in a state of absolute terror on her bed. On his way back, he decides to make a pit stop at Jules' house, and in a totally unexpected twist, he actually apologizes to her for all the damage he caused. He hands over the original disc, and right before he drives off, he confesses that all those feelings he expressed when they were texting, they were 100% real. The second Jules steps out of the truck, Nate calls Cassie to tell her he's coming to pick her up. He suggests they spend the whole weekend together and seals the deal with an "I love you." Cassie, absolutely starved for any scrap of affection, falls right into his web of lies. When she finally sees him face to face, she completely surrenders, telling him with pure devotion that she ruined her entire life for him. But she's utterly convinced that the sacrifice was worth it. A few days later, Lexi's big moment finally arrives. Opening night of her play, which is based entirely on her friend group's lives. The rest of the girls are absolutely floored, jaws literally dropping as they watch the characters on stage act as a perfect, undeniable mirror of their own lives. Despite all the underlying tension, every single act of the play is pure genius, and the audience is completely captivated. But sadly, Lexi's massive triumph is overshadowed by a creeping sadness when she notices the seat she reserved specifically for Fezco. It's still totally empty. The play pushes forward with this brutal, unapologetic honesty, exposing the most private, embarrassing moments of her friends' lives from Lexi's POV, since she's basically been collecting every little detail for years. And even though she never actually intended to hurt anyone, the truth is completely devastating. The stage showcases the evolution of Maddie and Cassie's friendship, from their glory days running the cheer squad when they practically ruled the school, all the way to that bitter, toxic moment of betrayal. The actress playing Maddie delivers the one line that cuts Cassie the deepest, that she would never do something like that to her best friend. The crushing weight of the guilt is just way too much for Cassie to bear. She bolts from the auditorium, absolutely drenched in tears, and locks herself inside the bathroom, trying desperately to pull herself together, but completely failing. At the exact same time, Nate is experiencing this incredibly vivid, deeply disturbing nightmare about his dad's video with Jules. In his twisted imagination, the image warps, and he actually takes the girl's place in the tape. When he finally snaps out of that sickening trance, the play has reached a massive boiling point. Lexi starts airing out all the dirty secrets of Cal's past, including the heavy sexual tension from his wrestling team days. Nate, practically consumed by sheer rage and humiliation, clenches his fist so hard his knuckles literally turn white. To the general audience, the performance is this bold, brilliant spectacle. But to Nate, it's a targeted, deeply humiliating personal attack that exposes his family's darkest cracks in front of the entire school. The deafening, roaring applause from the crowd is the absolute last straw. He totally loses his mind. He snaps, storming out of the auditorium at full speed. But right before he vanishes, he unloads all of his blind fury onto Cassie. He screams in her face that this entire humiliating freak show was all her sister's doing and demands she pack up and get out of his house immediately. Just like that, their relationship is completely dead and buried. Meanwhile, over at Fezco's house, the tension is absolutely suffocating. The situation is a literal powder keg. Custer, his old partner, shows up dropping the massive bomb that the cops finally found Mouse's body. But before Fezco can even process the news or react, Faye connects the dots. Thinking fast, she purposely knocks her glass right onto the floor. As she bends down to pick it up, she shoots Fez a subtle, secret signal to keep his mouth shut and not incriminate himself. She knows for a total fact that Custer is a rat, and he's definitely wearing a wire. Faye hasn't forgotten that Custer completely abandoned her at her absolute lowest, while Fezco actually took her in and gave her a roof over her head. So, she decides to flip the script and protect them. Custer is desperately trying to bait them into saying something, anything incriminating. but Ash completely blindsides him from behind, plunging a knife directly into his neck. Fezco acts on pure instinct, clamping his hand over Custer's mouth to muffle his screams as he bleeds out on the floor. Then, he grabs the traitor's phone and tosses it straight into a cup of soda, destroying any digital evidence on the spot. Immediately after, Fez actually punches Ash right in the face. He's trying to stage a fight, setting it up to take the absolute fall and make it look like he was the sole person responsible. He orders the kid to grab the cash and run before the cops swarm the place. But Ash, loyal to the bitter end, he flat out refuses to leave his brother behind. And that is the terrifying, heartbreaking reason Fezco never made it to Lexi's play. He has a dead body bleeding out in the middle of his living room. And he knows the cops are going to surround the house at any second. At the exact same time, back in the school auditorium, Nate's brutal rejection pushes Cassie way past the brink of sanity. With this terrifying, dead-eyed confidence, she marches straight onto the stage. She completely hijacks the performance, dragging Lexi right into the spotlight to publicly humiliate her in front of the entire crowd. And right in the middle of this absolute manic meltdown, Maddie storms the stage to get her revenge, unleashing total chaos, screaming and throwing hands. Finally, Cassie gets a taste of exactly what she deserves, getting beaten down right in front of all her classmates. But the craziest part of it all? The audience actually thinks this massive, violent brawl is just part of the play's edgy avant-garde narrative. And that bizarre stroke of luck gives Lexi just enough time to collect herself, rally her cast, and gear up for the grand finale. At the exact same time, the tension over at Fezco's house hits an absolute boiling point. Ash barricades himself inside the bathroom with a literal arsenal of weapons. Right at the exact second, the cops start pounding on the door. On the flip side, over at the warehouse where Cal's been hiding out, he seems to be thoroughly enjoying this wild, unhinged freedom, partying with men and women. When Nate suddenly shows up to visit him, he coldly asks if his dad is actually happier now than he ever was with his family. And Cal? Without a single ounce of guilt, he admits that yeah, he is. Right at that exact moment, the police raid the place. Nate, who had this entire thing meticulously planned out, pulls a gun to secure the situation. Then, he casually hands over a USB drive loaded with all the videos he collected of his dad, practically guaranteeing Cal will rot in prison for every single one of his crimes. We immediately cut back to Fezco's house, where the chaos has gone completely nuclear. A SWAT team kicks the door off its hinges, arresting Faye and pinning Fezco hard to the ground. But Ash? He stays totally barricaded and absolutely refuses to open that bathroom door. Instead of surrendering, the kid just starts blindly firing through the wood. One of those stray bullets accidentally hits his own brother, Fezco, right in the stomach, prompting the officers to unleash an absolute hail of gunfire that shreds the door to pieces. Ash just keeps firing, round after round, until the cops' heavy artillery completely destroys the entrance. The second the officers breach the room, Ash plays dead to buy himself some time. He catches them off guard and actually kills a cop, but his luck completely runs out right then and there. Fezco watches in absolute horror as a red laser dot creeps up the kid's body, locking dead onto his forehead, and a single, precise sniper shot ends his life instantly. The season closes out on a deeply bittersweet note. Lexi is completely incapable of enjoying the massive success of her play because of the tragedy that just unfolded. Her sister absolutely despises her. The guy she fell for is locked up in prison, and his little brother was just murdered. In the bathroom, after Maddie physically unleashes all her rage and beats down Cassie, she coldly assures her that she actually did her a massive favor by taking Nate off her hands. She wishes her good luck, warning her that she is definitely going to need it. Back in the auditorium, Jules finally apologizes to Rue for snitching on her and confesses her love. But Rue, in a rare show of maturity and distance, she simply kisses Jules on the forehead and walks away in total silence. The very next morning, Rue heads back to rehab one more time. She goes in carrying the hope that this time around she can actually endure the process and see it through, not just for herself, but for everyone who still genuinely cares about her well-being.